I'm gonna be too nerdy in explaining it.
Yeah.
I'd be way too nerdy in explaining why I think the Patriot way is a little bit overrated. So
only won them how many Super Bowls?
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Draft Vogel.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. The first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. With the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft.
The sickest NFL draft show. It's gonna be sick.
And welcome into the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel. I'm John Vogel, the host. Joining me, as always, Mr. Jarvis at Jarvis Scouting and Mr. Gamble at Gam Scouting. Follow me at Draft Vogel. Yeah, I know. I'm being polite tonight, gentlemen. I don't know. I feel like I have to be polite after that little soundbite we just got out of Jarvis, which I think is the first time we've ever gotten a soundbite that was less than 5 seconds out of Jarvis saying the Patriot way is overrated. That may be an episode in the future. That is not what we have on the plan for the show tonight.
I need a lot more than 10 seconds.
Well, let's think in the summer. We'll have plenty of time in the summer to get into some stuff. Yeah. So let's get into what Jarvis. Actually, I was about to say Jarvis's idea. This sounds like a Jarvis idea, but it actually is a Gam idea. So what we want to talk about tonight was basically 2 to 3 player evaluations that taught us the biggest lessons of our career, and then 2 to 3 players in this class that we're most likely to miss or be unsure about, which, knowing you guys, knowing how we kind of discuss things and get deep in the weeds, we're probably going to run overtime with this, but hey, we'll be fine. It'll be okay. So, gentlemen, I guess we should get underway. First off, Jarvis, you sounded really excited about this. I'm tempted to let Gam just torture you with, whatever lesson he has, but I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Jarvis, because you were really excited about this.
It actually is the
player eval that taught you the biggest lesson.
Gotcha. Well, I'll actually go kind of like latest to oldest, and I'm going to start with one that's actually a perfect bridge from last episode. Remember last episode I ended talking about Tyree Wilson, how I messed that up really bad, and I was like a practice squad guy in the summer. I actually want to use that one because it was one where I watched the tape on him. I'm watching 2022 tape. It was early 2022. It was like, I think 3 games in his college career as a starter, and I just did not like him at all. I thought his hands were mediocre. Felt like he really struggled to get low and play with leverage. Felt like he was an inconsistent run defender. Just really beat him up bad. And then, of course, the Blesser grade comes out, or the NFS grade, whichever one it was, comes out and says, yeah, this guy's a first rounder, top senior, so on and so forth. And then, of course, you know how the early mock drafts are going to react to that information as that leaks. Yep. And then by the end of the process, he's, 7th overall?
7th overall. Yep. 7th overall to the Raiders.
So this is one where it actually, I like the fact it's relatively recent because it gives an example of where even though I tried to switch towards, okay, let me care more about the profile, care about the outside view of it, I still hadn't done enough at that point in time in terms of caring about that. So insensitivity to size and overall profile, right? So he was 6'6", 270, 35-inch arms, had 7 sacks that season. Like, it's very clear when you look at that profile overall, playing at a P5, even though it's Texas Tech, like that guy's going to get a lot of attention. Now, you could say, oh, maybe the big, combine grades basically kind of pushed him up from where those scouts had him in the spring, but he still would have gone, even if he didn't get that early hype, he still would have gone relatively high, right? So yeah. I think that's the first one I'd point to is being insensitive to the size and overall profile of the player and severely whiffing on my projection on what's going to happen with him as a result. Oh, and one more thing I'd add too. So I actually switched my grading scale after that. So before it was only, hey, this is my film grade. This is where I think the guy's going to go in terms of like his value. Like, hey, he's going to be a practice squad guy, or hey, he's going to be a starter. I didn't completely get rid of that, but I also switched to adding in, okay, now we got to add in a round grade. So, okay, even if I put the guy as like a practice squad guy, I have to have a round grade that corresponds to that. And then I have to have a round grade that's kind of like what's the profile suggest he should go? And then kind of an overall of both of those grades.
Right. I have a question, Jarvis. Do you ever, because I think about this a lot, a guy that's a first rounder versus a guy that's a 4th, 5th rounder, it could be the exact same player, but where they get drafted kind of dictates how many opportunities they'll get to screw up and show that they actually are great or suck. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So does that ever do you ever take that into your grades, or how do you factor that in? Because I find myself struggling each and every year when the draft rolls around and I'm like, ooh, I like that guy that went in the 5th round, but he's probably not even going to get the opportunity to show that he's decent. So like, where do you go with that? Because Tyree Wilson, his rookie year was terrible. And I mean, he's not, he's so far away, you can see, from being a quality player, but the guy's going to get endless opportunities to show that. So how would I factor that in, or what should I do moving forward? What do you do?
Is this prior to the guy getting drafted, what you think your grade should be, or after, like how you reflect on it?
I mean, I guess it's prior, because a lot of guys, like, I'm trying to think, like, let's say Spencer Rattler, this upcoming draft. I think a lot of people are actually pretty bullish on him and think like, ooh, there's traits, there's pro ability, there's poise, there's a lot of things he does well. But I know he's not going to be a 1st-round pick. So I kind of have to know he's not going to get the same opportunities as some of these other guys have, whether it be this class or like in the past, like Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. People are still pounding the table for those 3, and they all suck. And it's like, but they're all going to get these weird opportunities that most other guys don't get.
Sam Darnold.
Yeah, exactly. So, going into a draft, all right, this guy's not going to be a 1st-rounder. Do you factor that into your evaluation, or do you just say, screw it, that's not, I'm not a team, I can't do that?
I think it depends on when you're doing the evaluation and to what degree. I mean, it's a personal choice, right? Like for me, when I watched Wilson, and like right now, I don't know if you've seen any stuff I put. I've moved on to next year's class. So I'm watching some guys for next year. I can't know what the league's consensus is going to be on them right now, right? Like I'll give you an example. Connor O'Toole from Utah. I'm thinking, okay, he's probably going to be like a 2nd to like 6th round type guy. It's a wide range, but that's kind of as much as I can narrow it down based on the overall profile right now. And so I can't really factor in where I think he's going to go and what type of opportunities he's going to get. But that's way, way, way in advance, right? That's before NFS and Bless do any of that. If you were to go, okay, now let's look at a guy for this class, like a Rattler, okay? Is my goal to project where Rattler's going to go, like in terms of like where he's going to go in the draft, like draft range? Is my goal to project what type of player I think he's going to be? And is my goal to project what type of raw talent he has? And like, if you were to just kind of grade in a vacuum, what my opinion is, right? Yeah. Like it all just depends on the type of angle you want to put on it. I think that's a good point though, overall, in regards to the aspect of where a guy goes determines his future opportunities to a large degree, right? Like Blaine Gabbert has floated around the league for how long? And most guys that had the career he's had so far would not be hanging around still, but he's still kicking around because he has that, 1st round billing. He went very early. There were tools that people saw and believed in. One thing I would point out too, and it ties into Tyree Wilson, right, is this idea of where a guy's going to go, how that changes the path of his career. Like Tyree Wilson, to me, he was better, but like I don't think the gap was huge versus like a Miles Cole, who has nearly the same measurables. Right. So Wilson was 6'6", 271, 35-inch arms. He was more productive, more polished overall as a player, but Cole was 6'6", 278 with near 37-inch arms. Yeah. So Cole, I actually talked to an agent about this in the season because I was trying to figure out what the deal is where, I mean, I know Cole was less productive and he's probably a lesser athlete in terms of what you see on the field, but like pretty similar profiles, like almost exact matches and outside of the production. And Cole's talked about 6th, 7th round at the time by these scouts, and Wilson's a top 10 pick. Well, what's the difference between the two, and why is one here and the other one there,
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question a little bit. You can follow up if you want.
It does. No, it does. I mean, that's because I think, like you said, there's only so much you can do, and it depends on the angle you're coming from. And I think in a scouting report, that should probably be part of it, where you say, if he ends up in this type of system or this type of team, that's when you could see him flourish. But if this cornerback ends up in this type of system, like you're going to see him fall off, and it's not going to fit him, and you're going to see, a player that probably doesn't look like the 1st-round player he was taken as. And I think like Quinion Mitchell for me this year is that guy where I think I want him in a press system. I want him up and disrupting early and disrupting the route, because he's a little linear and he's a little tight, but he's competitive and he's fast. So, you can put him in press and not worry about him getting blown by. He doesn't need the whole play in front of him, where I think when you get him in space, that's when you're going to see him, have false steps and his hips are going to get a little wonky and you're going to see him get beat. But you're going to get either an elite player or you're going to get a guy that looks like a fish out of water. And so I think a lot of times that should be in the report. That way you can say, look, I did my part, and I don't draft him and I don't coach him. So what else can I do? But at least you kind of cover your bases, because a lot of times you'll look like a fool in your eval when it's like, there was stipulations to this whole thing. And that's just one part of it, but I think it's an important part of it.
One thing I'll throw out here, and I know we got to keep kicking it through because we got a lot of guys to cover here, is this aspect of, let's say you could change your grade right after a guy gets picked. How many times are you changing your grade? Is it like every single guy you're changing that grade based on where he lands?
No, probably not. That's a good question, actually. I mean, I want to say no, but I think a lot of times, we'll watch the draft and the guy gets picked to a certain place, and I'm like, shit, that's not gonna go well. And I don't know if you change your grade, but like I said, as long as it's in the evaluation of, don't expect this out of this guy, or don't think you can do, put him in this system and this fit. That's not for, you know what I mean? It's more of that type of thing. But I don't think I'd ever really like to change my grade on a guy, because that just feels kind of inauthentic. But it is and that's our part about being in media. All three of us is they'll ask us to do a rankings list, and I'm like, for which team, for what system, for what role? I can't just rank these guys. That's not how that works. They're all different types. So just putting one after the other, when like a receivers, a lot of times, I'll put this receiver over this receiver, and then the second guy gets drafted to a better spot, and I'm like, he's going to be better. I promise you, he'll be more productive. He'll be better than the guy that was drafted in front of him. But that's just part of our problem we have, is we are stacking all these guys up against each other, having no clue where they're going to go or where they're going to be at, or what they're going to be asked to do. And that's very, very tough. Two
things. One, why does it feel inauthentic? It's incorporating new information, it's incorporating what's been.
Right.
Now
you said all this stuff already, right? It's like you've already made your decision. Okay, this is where I think he is. Blah 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 blah. And then you see him get drafted to a team where he's not going to be utilized correctly, because let's say he's a match 4 corner and he goes to a man coverage system. You're worried about that. You're worried because he's going to have to play press. He's going to have to jam. He's going to have to do things like that. You don't typically do that in a match 4 system. You're typically playing 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, or 5 yards off, or 15 yards off, depending on what your alignment is. So it's like, well, if he's going to be asked to play man and jam, he's going to suck. Hey, that's not part of his. That's not part of his profile. So it feels an authentic, Gam, I think, because we're doing this publicly. We're putting our stuff out here. We're saying before the draft, hey, this is what I think of this guy, blah, blah, blah. I really like him. And then you see him go to a team where he's not going to fit. Well, you kind of have to adjust your grade to it, in the sense that, well, he's not going to fit this system very well. He's going to suck because he's going to be asked to do things that he's really not that great at doing, and they're going to hope they could develop up, unless they just have a plan for him and to do some other role. That's when you start looking at, okay, maybe I evaluate him as a corner, and instead of evaluating him as a corner, I should have evaluated him as maybe like a box safety, a rover. Maybe that's the role they're going to ask him to play. So that's how, that whole thing kind of changes. And the way I look at it, when you're looking at guys, after the draft, you totally look at the fit. You totally look at what's going on the team. Hey, are these guys going to be an immediate impact guys? I'll give you a great example. I missed on C.J. Stroud last year. I think everybody missed on C.J. Stroud last year when he got drafted by Houston. It's like, yeah, he's going to be good at some point, maybe. But, that offense right now is a mess, and there's all kinds of problems. No, they were awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of it had to do with CJ being that guy, stepping in there, using the weapons that he had, and processing correctly. That was something we didn't see out of him at Ohio State,
Well, and I don't think we saw Bobby Slowick doing what he ended up doing. The way that he catered a system and created this whole new thing that I don't think any of us saw coming. That was like, oh, wow. Look what he's doing to utilize CJ Stroud's strengths. I didn't see that coming. I wouldn't know.
It's like using Shanahan's concepts, right? The Shanahan-McVay type concepts. That's where Slowick comes from. So it's at West Coast. But making it, instead of stretching it so that you've got guys being schemed open underneath or in the intermediate areas, he's attacking too high with 3 vertical routes and still having somebody dragging under it. He was just very vertical with his attack. And that's why, you go back to that wild card game they played against Cleveland, CJ's airing the ball out nonstop because they've got this aggressive defense. that they're playing against that's going to go man coverage. It's going to go one high, and they're just torching them because they got too many vertical routes.
Well, and they routinely used 11 and 12 personnel and were using 6-7 man protections. Like they were selling out to do what they wanted to do and do it right. You know what I mean? And a lot of teams don't do that. A lot of teams just kind of say, we're going to win hopefully our way. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but we're not going to adjust. And
not to get completely sidetracked, but to add to that point, if you look at Miami this year, Miami would not run anything other than a 5-man protection most of the time. And they had the worst offensive line in the NFL. So that's another aspect where they're like, hey, we got all this speed. We can make up for it by putting all this, getting these guys, these 4-3 guys running, blah, blah, blah. Hey, that might work in college because you've got a bunch of guys with 4-3 speed, and it works for them. They won games. They put up points. But at the end of the day, you're not playing corners that are running Kamari Lassiter 4.6s. I'm sorry, I just had to say that. You're playing guys that run 4.4s and 4.5s and even some 4.3s, so they can match that speed in those first 10, 15 yards before you get back to the quarterback. So one of the adjustments you need to see Miami make this year, they've got to get into some more 6-7 man protections. 8-man protection if you have to. Do something to protect that damn quarterback.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's my tangent's over.
All good. Jarvis, what else did you have to add with your Tyree Wilson, or do you want me to take over?
I was just going to throw out too. You mentioned the aspect of like it should be kind of incorporated into the report. That's why I don't know if you do this, but like I do kind of a range grade. So I'll do like a low end grade and a high end grade. And if the guy falls in the middle, I count it as a win. So that way you can kind of account for, hey, if I just put the guy as a quality starter, odds of him just being a quality starter, regardless of fit, are probably not very high. But if I have Hayes like a replaceable starter to a quality starter, if he ends up being a backup, then I was wrong. If he ends up being like really, really good, then I know I was wrong. But like there's a range that kind of accounts for where he goes. I just want to throw that out, and then you can go move on to your point.
Understandable.
So Gam, who's your biggest lesson here? Because I think we're only going to have time now, judging by how that conversation went, for like one player.
I'm fine with breaking up into a couple episodes if you want, because I was very excited for this topic, but we can keep it kicking for this one.
We can keep it rolling for another one. But I mean, so one of the things that I've learned evaluating quarterbacks, looking back to 2017 with Trubisky, Mahomes, Watson, Kaiser, Davis Webb, then 2018 Mayfield, Darnold, Allen, Rosen, Lamar Jackson. Someone told me a long time ago, quarterbacks, when you evaluate them, obviously the traits are very, very important. The arm strength, the accuracy, the size, the speed, whatever. But it's about who is hardest to play against. Someone told me that when there was the Deshaun Watson year, and so many guys said Deshaun Watson was just hard to play against because the guy is an absolute baller. He's a playmaker. He will die, and he'll die before he makes a negative or before he loses the game, basically. Like, that's the thing. So I'm looking back at some of these guys, and I'm looking back at these draft classes back up to 2021 with Lawrence, Wilson, Lance, Fields, Jones. And I'm like, I loved Zach Wilson was my quarterback one, but I don't think looking back, I should have done that because along with the rest of that whole class, were just not guys that I would say were tough to play against. Where, Patrick Mahomes in college, you could say was a complete wild card. His accuracy was a little scattershot here and there. He was just, I wouldn't call him polished, but the guy was an absolute monster to play against, just like Deshaun Watson. Where Trubisky was a little vanilla. There just wasn't much to him. There wasn't really a gamer. Deshaun Kaiser, same thing, kind of vanilla, not much to him, not much of a playmaker. I mean, the list goes on and on. Then we see the 2018 year with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. No shocker, those two are the best out of that class right now. And those two are aliens who have become, actually polished quarterbacks who can absolutely carry an offense. Where Darnold, we talked about him already. I mean, he's just a journeyman who I don't know if he'll ever be good again. Mayfield got a big contract, but I think the guy's kind of average. Well,
the thing about Mayfield, he is average by NFL starting standards, right?
Right.
But it's what Jason Licht said about him today, which was because he called him a prick, and then he had to correct himself in the press conference, and he's like, no, look, the thing with Baker is his attitude. He's like an offensive lineman compared to the rest of these quarterbacks. So Baker has some gamer to him.
Yeah, he does.
As long as you don't, because that's one of the things they talked about this whole, toward the end of his time in Cleveland when the regime changed and, they brought in, They got rid of Greg Williams, and they bring in Kevin Stefanski after that 1 year experiment with who was it? It was a 1 year experiment though. Those
coach?
Yeah, coach.
Oh, Kitchens, Freddie Kitchens.
Freddie Kitchens, that's right.
Yeah.
So Kitchens goes through, and then he's gone. Now you bring in Stefanski, and that's a totally different setup. That falls apart at the end because they're like, "Hey, Baker, you got to tone it down. Like you can't be this prick all the time, basically." So would you let him kind of be, and he's matured a lot since he came out of Oklahoma, obviously, but when you let him kind of be that prick in the locker room and on the field and in that type of leadership style, players gravitate to him, and he could be a gamer. That's why they were in the divisional round this year. Had no business being there, really.
Well, what was the record? Like 9-8. I mean, he still wasn't fantastic. He
wasn't. But they go on that winning streak at the end of the year to get in, right?
Right.
He's not. He is average. He's average by NFL starting quarterback standards, right? Like he is an average starter, but he's got that gamer, and players want to play for him.
And that's why he's still a starter, and Rosen and Darnold are not. You know what I mean? I think that goes back to
Rosen was like interested in politics, wasn't he? Like there was so many other things,
hot tubs, and I loved Rosen. You know what I mean? But I missed on some of these guys where I'm like, look at I ask myself these two questions a lot of times now when I evaluate quarterbacks: who has legit answers to problems, like who's a problem solver, but also who wants to be the answer. Because some guys like Justin Fields, we look at him and say, him and Trey Lance, big arms, mobile guys, could be playmakers, but something about them is missing. Something about like the package that comes with being a valuable high-level quarterback is missing with them. And I think when you ask who wants to be the answer, who wants to be the playmaker, you see guys like Allen, Lamar Jackson, Watson, Mahomes, maybe not Watson anymore, but Mahomes. And that's the thing. It's like people always point out Johnny Manziel to me. And I'm like, all right, well, there has to be a baseline of how much they care about football, and there has to be a threshold of what kind of tools they have, because Manziel was small, slow, and had a weak arm. All right, we still have to, have common sense and look at the traits that go into being an NFL quarterback. And I think he was just below that threshold, but I also don't want to mistake exciting with good. And I think that was Johnny Manziel for me. I didn't miss on him. I thought he was undraftable. Just on the field, I like there's no way this little guy that runs 4.68 or whatever can play the NFL quarterback, and turns out can't. Was drafted first round, but it derailed quickly, partially because of on-field play, partially because of the stuff that he had going off the field. But I mean, there was just a big lesson there that I think a lot of people hopefully have learned now, and I think maybe I didn't learn that with Zach Wilson, because Zach Wilson was immature, I think, and probably not ready for the NFL game. But hopefully that'll be the last time I make that kind of mistake. But I think I learned a lot from that eval as well.
One thing I would throw out here is you mentioned Manziel. Like even the best guideline, if you want to put it that way, for like, oh, who's the guy who has the answer to the problems, or who's the guy you least want to play against? Those are never going to be 100%, right? Like there's always going to be guys where like you might say, okay, it should work here, and then it doesn't. And that's the thing I think with any guy we're going to point out here as an example where we missed. You probably could find a guy who succeeded with similar background, just a matter of what's the probability of it, right? Like what are the odds that type of guy succeeds? And I think that the one you mentioned of just, hey, what guys are you least want to play against? That's a great baseline for majority of the time. If you don't want to play against a guy, he's probably pretty good. Yeah.
And it's usually I use it as like a tiebreaker, because I know it's not an end all be all, but a lot of times like the 2017 class, I had a similar grade on like 4 guys. I'm like, who, and I didn't ask myself these questions at the time. I just said, I like Kaiser, I like Trubisky. So they're definitely first rounders. When looking back, I'm like, how did I miss on Trubisky so badly? And I had a first round grade on Watson and Mahomes, but they should not have been clumped together. It should have been, clearing away Mahomes, Watson, and then everyone else. But I didn't have it that way. And I think looking back, it's silly, because Trubisky was nothing close to what they were talent wise, you know what I mean? And competitor wise. So that's on me. And like I said, hopefully I won't make mistakes like that moving forward, even though it's inevitable. But
it's interesting that you went with the running quarterback, because I mean that's where I was going to go, or just quarterbacks in general. I was going to go with the running quarterback, and it was because, 2018, that cycle, Lamar Jackson comes out, and I was sitting there watching him going, he's exciting, he's fun, obviously he's really fast, but this doesn't work in the NFL. Like played this game for Terrell Pryor, right? But like I was listening to Bill Polian at that point too. And if you remember, Polian on Sirius Radio that year hated Lamar Jackson, just like hated him. Oh man, he should be moving to wide receiver. I don't know why he's doing this to his career, blah, blah, blah. I was in that camp too. I was kind of sitting there like, why is Lamar so adamant about playing quarterback? You know what I'm saying? Like, that just did not make sense to me. So then you watch him go to Baltimore, and you watch them over the next 2 years replace Flacco and start to create this tailor-made offense to make it work with Lamar Jackson. And then you see him slowly starting to process better, pick up that accuracy, get better as a passer. And it's like the one thing I think I learned from that evaluation, it was years later, talking with a guy that knew Lamar back to his days in high school. And it kind of said, hey, the thing you got to understand about Lamar is he's always played quarterback like this. This has been his way that he's always done it. This is not something he got to college and he just started doing.
Yeah.
This is how he plays the position. And so when you understand that's where he comes from, that's his background, and you could cater that offense to it, he's going to have a massive understanding of what that offense looks like, what that style of playing quarterback looks like. And so when you go and you look at a guy like Jalen Hurts, right? Now I know we've talked about Jalen extensively on this podcast, especially because I'm a huge Jalen guy. I was a huge Jalen guy coming out. Jarvis makes really good points about, well, if he goes anywhere else, is he the quarterback? Probably not, but he ends up in the right spot. And now teams are open because you had Lamar come in, have a really good 2019. You've had Jalen come in, and he started to expand. Now we're talking about Jayden Daniels being a top 5, top 2 pick in the draft. Why are we talking about that? Because these guys paved the way for offenses in the NFL to open it up. The Kyler Murray too. Kyler Murray helped with that a lot as well. So now we're looking at the whole position differently. Instead of looking at, hey, the Aaron Rodgers type, the Tom Brady type, the Kirk Cousins type, there's multiple ways to play quarterback now. And if you can, as you can see an offense building itself to mold it around that running quarterback and allow them to develop as a passer. That's why Lamar started to develop as a passer, because he always played quarterback that way. When he gets to the league, now we get to start working on, hey, let's get your feet, in rhythm. Let's get them kind of taken care of so you could be more consistent with your accuracy. You're just building blocks at that
I think
point.
one thing real quick that was lost on Lamar coming out of Louisville, though, is he was one of the best between the numbers passers we've seen. I mean, he was fantastic over the middle of the field. So it's not like he had no strengths as a passer. Like outside the numbers was rubbish and vertical, bad. But between the numbers, I mean, he was amazing. You add that with, a well above average arm and the elite runner that he was. And that's why, I didn't love him, but I was like, I think this is a guy that can play NFL quarterback. There's just you're going to live with some growing pains. And obviously Baltimore has. I mean, there's been some seasons.
Paid off.
But up till last season.
2 MVPs, bro. Come on.
I mean, they're still searching for that ring for their boys, but
hey, you can't blame Lamar Jackson when your offensive coordinator goes into the AFC Championship game and calls 8 run plays. You can't.
No, I'm not blaming Lamar. I'm just saying they've had to live with growing pains as far as what he is as a quarterback and a passer. I mean, it's been a little less than ideal sometimes, but I mean, he's still, like you said, a 2-time MVP and arguably an elite quarterback sometimes. So and that's why Jayden Daniels, I don't like the comparison. People compare him and Jaden because Lamar was a fantastic over the middle of the field passer. Jaden is the exact opposite. I mean, he's a deep ball outside the numbers guy, but we see him routinely pass up open players over the middle. We see him routinely pass up drags and in breakers like that. He just won't do it. He'd rather pull it and run. And that's what scares me about Jaden is.
But think about it. Just think about it for a second. From a schematic standpoint, if you're an electric runner like Jayden Daniels, are you going to take the drag when the linebacker's already moving out of the middle of the field and it's opening up for you when you know you can go get 10, 15 yards? You're going to take the 5 to the drag.
Right. And then the part that scares me is, so in the NFL, what are you going to do? Because when guys can chase you down and DCs are more prepared, where do you kind of bridge the gap between, all right, this is when I do need to throw it, and am I confident to do so? Because sometimes they're wide open. I've seen so many reps watching his film where I'm like, dude, hit Neighbors, hit him. He's wide open and he won't do it. I'm like, all right, you scrambled and kind of put out your own fire and got 6 yards, but you're also passing up clearly open people. And you can tell it's a confidence thing. Like over the middle of the field, it's rare that he'll just rip it. And so in the NFL, when you realize the athletes, you can't run the way you did in college, do you now have the ability and the reps and the confidence to throw the way you were supposed to? Or is it kind of, are we done?
So, so that's the one thing. That's the one thing from the media side that we'll never get. Because the answer to that question is you sit down with them in those interviews at the combine, do your 20 minutes, and you have him break down film, you pull up the tape, whatever. When he comes into the facility for his top 30 visit, you have a day with him. Like you sit down and you go, okay, what are you doing here? What's this? What's that? Why won't you take this? Blah, blah, blah. And figure out what was he being coached at LSU. Like, I'm not trying to shit on Brian Kelly or anything because he's done a fantastic job really since he's been at LSU from a winning standpoint. But from a developing quarterback standpoint, have we ever seen Brian Kelly put out an NFL quarterback? Have we ever seen a guy come into the league from his systems that are any bit prepared? I mean, you think like Ian Book? Ian Book was nowhere near prepared for the league, bro. Nowhere.
I don't even think he's had that many talented players at quarterback, though, is the thing.
Yeah, so he gets a guy like this, and he's like, yeah, dude, tuck it and run. Like, what is he being coached? I think that's another aspect, and that's just one thing from the media side we'll never get, right? Yeah. But from the you can get those questions pretty well answered when you figure out. Now, if the answer could be bad. It could be, oh, yeah, I just want to take off and run. I know I'm a runner, blah, blah. Okay, well, now we're talking, that's probably not good, right? Now that concern that you're talking about, that's a really good concern that you have. So yeah, I think that's just for me. If we're talking about him going top 2, then we probably know from the interviews already that teams feel really good about his processing and that it was a coaching issue and what he was being told to do at LSU as opposed to what he's actually capable of doing.
Yeah, potentially. Jarvis, you're cooking, baby. I see it.
I was about to ask John. I said, John, do you want me to make Gam very mad? That's what I was thinking.
Oh boy,
let's do it.
He says, "Do it. Let's do it. Make him mad."
He said it's clearly a confidence thing for Jayden Daniels throwing over the middle. How do you know it's a confidence thing?
I don't know. I just wonder if it is. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, yeah, like John said, you'll take the safer option, right? So you've got a throw that you're like, it's not easy, but like doable. Or I can just take off and run, right? But then you get to the NFL and the defenders are faster, the windows are a little smaller, and now you can't run because teams have accounted for that, or it's just not there. Because that's awesome, John. Or
I have no idea what I did.
or Jarvis, like we've seen teams bottle up Lamar, right? We've seen teams bottle up Lamar, and it's like, yeah, you can't run anymore. Like the NFL athletes are that much better, so now you have to throw it. Can you? And then it becomes a confidence thing like, oh, shoot, I've attempted this throw a bunch of times, and I'm not sure how to beat NFL DBs doing it. So now you've got a player that's not the dynamic runner he once was, and he's also kind of strides behind as a passer, and that kind of breaks confidence sometimes. And I'm not saying I know it's a confidence issue. I'm just hoping that we see a guy that kind of has a trump card one way or another. Like we saw I see Sam Howell in Washington, right? And I've seen Jayden Daniels mocked to number 2 Washington. And I have to ask myself, like, is he an upgrade over Sam Howell? Sam Howell was asked to throw the ball, I think, more last year than any other quarterback in the entire NFL. And he kind of balled out doing it a lot of times. But he's on an average team with an average O-line. And he's being asked to play hero ball when he's like a 5th, 6th round pick. Probably shouldn't put him in that spot. So is Jaden an immediate upgrade as a passer? Probably not. And then if you take away or if you limit his running and make him not as dynamic anymore, like where is he a huge upgrade over a lot of current quarterbacks? Is my question.
Great point here, Gam, but it's countered because that's a totally different system now. I mean, look at the free agent they just brought in to play backup quarterback. It's Marcus Mariota, right? Mariota's and Sam Howell are not the same type of quarterback. Jayden Daniels and Mariota are much closer to the same type of quarterback than Howell and Mariota is. And you like to pair your 2 with your 1, at least in style normally, right? So, new offensive coordinator too. Bieniemy's gone.
Right.
Cliff Kingsbury's in. Oh, who's Cliff worked with? Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray.
Right.
Yeah.
The system change
Jayden
will
Daniels
probably
make
be
all
good.
sense in the world.
Yeah, he does. Again, like on paper, sure. We've seen this a million times though, where it's like, looks great on paper. Like last time Cliff had Kyler, we're like, oh, how could this go wrong? Went wrong, didn't work. You know what I mean?
There was a lot more to that, and we know there was a lot more to that.
But that system was
on the contract side.
He was not ready for the NFL.
I do want to point out here, Jarvis, very well done on making him completely backtrack off of what he said. So,
did I do that? I don't know.
You went. Oh, he's clearly a confidence issue too. Well, I don't know if it's a confidence issue. So yeah,
I just want to see what your reaction would be.
Yeah, I don't know if I said clearly. Didn't mean. I mean, my only problem is when I see guys staring down a wide open person and then they don't throw it. I just ask myself, like, it's no coach is like, don't throw to open people. Yeah. Take off and run. That's never been said one time ever. So I just wonder, like, why wouldn't you throw it? Obviously you took off.
You're
thinking
really cool. That there's
but I'm like, there's something that I'm missing here. Something he's missing. And
you're thinking there has to be a guy that I'm not seeing. He can't be that wide open as a quarterback.
Sometimes, yeah. And that's that's happened with Jaden's tape more than anyone in this class so far. And I just kind of get infuriated, like, bro, just throw it. Like, I wish I could sit down with Jaden and ask what's going on, but yeah, I won't get that opportunity. So,
Jaden, hit us up.
Yeah, let us know what you're thinking.
No, but okay, so we're already at like 40 minutes, so I think we'll have to come back around to the 2-3 players
so fast.
Most likely to miss and be unsure about.
Yeah.
But that might be a good topic to bring up next episode, actually.
Yeah, we should. I mean, because this class is wild, and there's a lot of players that I see with like projections all over the board. So yeah, and I know Jarvis
could be really good, could be really bad. Jarvis has got to
do it.
Jarvis has been cooking.
No, Jarvis, save it, because I want you to stew.
We want you to overthink this.
Yeah. Here.
I want you to totally overthink this.
Yeah.
Totally overthink it.
If you can save it, please do.
I've already overthought it. I have everything laid out here. I've got 2 guys that I want to cover.
Probably got essays written on them and everything.
2 guys that are potential misses this year. So I don't have essays, but I just know I have a few guys that kind of always stick out in my mind as like stories of like, why did I miss on this guy so badly? And I can point very clearly to the point where I missed on him. So
do it next episode because I got to run. and I really, really, really want to hear this.
Are you going to say happy birthday to John?
I have no idea how I did that. Yeah, I must have hit something on my keyboard. That's the only thing I can figure.
Remember last week you had the thing coming out of your head or mouth? Something's up with your side.
Yep.
It might be producer Shane. Producer Shane might just be trolling.
Shane could be fucking with me back there. That's also possible.
I wouldn't put it past him. He's Canadian, so you never know.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay, Shane. We love you. Well, let's get out of here. We're going to come back with you later this week, and or maybe I guess it'll be next week, technically. Next week, we'll be back with you, and I guess we'll get into 2-3 players in the class we're most likely to miss or beat that we're unsure about. That'd be a good conversation. But until next time, Mark Jarvis, follow him at Jarvis Scouting. Justen Gamble, follow him at Gam Scout. Follow me at Draft Vogel. Follow the show at SickPod NFL Draft. And Shane, let's get out of here.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.